Hi everyone. So here we're going to look at my own games in the Czech Perk. We will be doing master games in the Czech Perk as well, but I feel like this will give us a better understanding of how I play the Czech Perk and how in practice it can translate in your real games. So here, this is about 6 months ago against Federico Rocco, who's a candidate master from England. 2160 odd, been over 2200 before, so a very solid player, good player. And I think this is a good example of how you can, if you have the Czech Perk in your repertoire, you can get some quick wins against players who aren't that experienced with it. And if you think about it, this player, similar rating to me, could be a very tough game as black against him. But he didn't know this opening very well, I think. And we were able to get a very nice win. That I've actually had games pretty much like this on Bullet and Blitz all the time, even at the very high levels. So and this will show you how white can go wrong very quickly, especially when they go for this aggressive line with e5 early. So queen f3. Now this is one of the main lines. Bishop d3, knight a6. So here, he really should be thinking of playing f5. I think black's doing okay still. We can play g6, and if this h5. But it's much better than the game, and he's probably slightly better still, only a bit, but we're doing fine. But it's not too bad. Or the way I think most grandmasters would handle this as white is he could play knight e2, and just after knight b4, obviously he doesn't want to take this because of the f5 trap, which we've seen before. I mean, I'll just show it again. Takes, this. And c2 is falling because after this. So it's a common trap, very, very effective. But the way I'd play this as white, or grandmaster plays as white, is they go castles. And so we've got a very double-edged position. The engine probably slightly prefers white, but it's not massively so. Problem white has is a3 doesn't really threaten anything at the moment, so he probably has to make another move. He'd like to play bishop d2, but he can't because the knight e4. You know, worst case scenario for us, we can take on d3, take on c3, play e6. I mean, we're very solid here. We're fine. In the game, he took on e4 straight away. And I actually think that in this position, he's in trouble. So we're just going to play bishop f5. And we're going to play knight b4. And it's just simplistic plan, right? But how do you stop this? I mean, it's actually impossible almost without jettisoning material. Like, you want to play in an ideal world, you want to play a3 here. But the problem is knight b4 comes anyway. We're going to win this rook on a1. So we just play bishop f5, knight b4. So a3 does nothing. Knight e2 doesn't help. We're just going to play bishop f5, knight b4 anyway. And there's no real way for him to stop us this. There's literally none. If he has to start making moves like rook b1, just sacking c2, then we must be better, right? And so in the computer actually prefers knight f3 for him here. So in this position, play this move. After this, castles. So this is a bit of a crazy position, but I think black's doing quite well. In the game, he played bishop d2, which is mistake. Knight b4. So we're just going to play bishop f5, right? Like we said. And there's nothing he can really do. The problem he has also is if he castles queenside, for example, we can probably just play bishop f5 anyway and take on a2 maybe. Because his king on c1 is very exposed. And yeah, I think he might even be getting checkmated if he's not careful. So he ends up having to sack this rook. And objectively speaking, FIDE rated game, slow play. you'd back yourself here to win 9 out of 10, at least. White's just the exchange down, and his pieces are very uncoordinated. We've actually got the bishop pair as well, so we just play quite solid here. With our queen on a light square, play this, play f5. It's important for us that this knight doesn't have any sort of move because it's pinned. I just played extra safe, get a king to g7, and then rook e8, and it's basically a good game already, really. It's hopeless. And he actually resigned here, so yeah. Now I know a lot of you probably thinking, why did I show that game? I mean, my opponent played it wrong, who cares about that game? But that's the sort of game that you're going to get if you start knowing this defense as black. You're going to get that online and blitz bullet especially, and even over the board against some players who aren't that well prepared. You're going to get that sort of scenario happening a lot. And so let's be sharp to that sort of thing, because that thing of just sacking e4, e6, bishop f5, knight b4, it looks simplistic, but trust me, it happens even against title players time and time again, especially in shorter time limits. Okay, so we're trying to show a range of different games, how things have gone well, how things have gone badly. And in the last game, we had a quick win. In this game, I'm hopefully going to show you how you can do more of a grind in the main line as black. So we're up against a veteran player, very active in senior chess. He's been a lot higher rated than that before. He's around in the 1900s now. And he's a very principled player. And hopefully this will show with this bishop g4 line, which I recommend in the repertoire. And hopefully this will show some tactics that we use to try and get the win. Because he plays probably the most principled moves every time. And how do we try and win this? Because obviously if we put it through an engine, it's going to give him 0.8, 0.9 here, because he's playing the main line, and we know that the computer prefers space. He's got these lovely pawns on F, E, and D. Got nice development, safe king, whereas we're potentially got to be a bit careful. So let's say we castled here. Suddenly knight d5. Knight d5 is very annoying for us because we lose a piece if we take this sort of check. And if we go back, he can take, and this is just two bishops for nothing. And yeah, I think white's just better there. So how do we create play here? Well, there's a thematic idea, which is to use the fact that this bishop is kind of trapped in the sense that can't really get out of this next plan, which is to take on f3. So if he takes the rook here, we go knight g4, and we've completely equalized. Then we're going to try and get play on this diagonal with the bishop, and we also have some nice tactical ideas. There are some lines. Let's say he goes h3 here, takes, d5, and we're threatening bishop c5. And if he takes g7, we're going to get amazing play on the g file after castling queenside, and it gets a bit crazy. It's there's a lot of options. Hopefully that just gives you a little taster. But he goes g takes f3, which is a winning try actually, and it gets very interesting. We play knight h5. Knight h5. It's a normal move in these type of positions. Good to remember it, because the idea is to put pressure on f4, and at some point we could even consider getting h6, bishop g5 ideas after any exchange. If we could one day somehow get one of these knights onto f4, that would be really nice for us. And in this position, I think this is very illustrative. He went wrong. So what he's trying to do here is he's trying to improve his worst placed piece, which most trainers would tell you to do, right? Because he's got a safe king. All his pieces are developed. I've played a couple of odd-looking moves, knight h5, queen a5. They're not very principled. And so he's just going to improve his worst placed piece, which is this bishop, because it's trapped by its own pawns. But as with many of the lines in the Czech Perk, often the traditional moves actually don't work. So we're actually better now. It seems, and I think this is quite nice, that this is why Czech Perk often scores so highly below, I'd say, 2300 FIDE, because often White's most natural moves are errors, and I don't see bishop c4 isn't an obvious thing for anyone below master level, I'd say, to even consider being a bad move. Yeah, actually he's losing for him. Not quite lost, but losing. Because the whole point here is this d file, after castling queenside or rook d8, it's going to be very, very weak. We already have ideas of this rook taking on d4 at some point, and bishop c5. We also have ideas of just rook d8 and then c5. And we also have ideas of just getting our knight to f4 at some point, whether via knight g6 to f4. And if he's not careful, this bishop on c4 is kind of vulnerable, because yes, we're planning to take it, but let's say in the future we can do a sort of, if this bishop wasn't here, we could go queen c5 check and gobble it up. So he has to be very careful. He ends up taking on e5. And suddenly h2 is very weak on this diagonal. So we've got bishop d6 coming. We've got knight f4 coming. We've got rook d8 coming. And we're also threatening queen c5 check, winning this bishop. So the position has gone from being really safe, principled, slightly better for white, in just one natural move, bishop c4. Suddenly black is way better, and white's in a lot of trouble. And at the board, I knew at this point that I was probably going to win the game, because these positions, because I played a Czech Perk so many times, I've had this type of position hundreds of times. We're gonna be able to cause a lot of problems for our opponent. So knight e2 tries to meet queen c5 or queen d4 probably, but tactically h2 very weak. So knight c3. If he's having to play knight c3, yeah, he's got to be worse. So he casts queenside, threatening bishop c5 check. Also threatening just, to put on the pressure, knight f4, queen g5 ideas. King h1, knight f4, just, which is, the engine thinks is a mistake actually. So that was a bad move by me. Yeah, so we might be able to do some better stuff, but I think we're still quite a bit better here. So queen f2 and just bishop c5. So we're going to go rook d2 if we can. But he covers it. Now here I think queen g5 might win on the spot actually. We'll be close to winning. Maybe he can just about survive with queen g3. But I played rook d6. So the idea here is to play rook h6 and then queen g5. And we've got all sorts of pressures going on. This king is actually trapped. So for example here, I was hoping he's playing queen g3. And then we get this lovely checkmate idea. So this would be checkmate. This would be lovely. Because he can't move the king. And yeah, I think he's just completely lost here. So rook d2 tries to somehow survive, but just take it. Bishop e3. Queen's overloaded. g2 can't be defended without losing the queen. So he has to jettison material. I mean, h4, desperate try. Maybe if I take it, he can somehow get an ending. But queen h2 or something, but even this would be lost. I mean, my pieces are much better than his here, even in an ending. But I can just play queen c5. And after queen c5, I think he's just resignable, because he's going to take c4 after the queen moves. And then his rook on f1 is also on pre. So knight a4 to take it. And he resigned because we're just going to take an f1. And there's nothing he can do here. He's just lost. Yeah, so that game showed how we can grind a bit. Now the next games, we're going to show you what happens when we face younger, hungrier, well-prepared opponents that have prepared against us. So in both these games, we're going to be playing title players, FIDE Master Stanley Berlusconi, and we're also going to be playing Tamai Chopra from India, and they're going to be trying to crush us off the board with interesting ideas in the main line, having prepared them against us. But despite them getting inferior, better position, we were able to get draws in both games against high-rated opposition, and hopefully, even though this might be a wins for us, we'll show you how much, even in objectively bad positions, Czech Pirc has so much hidden resources. And yeah, in both those games, actually, in the point we drew, both of our opponents were like, they were feeling happy they got the draw because we had great counter chances. So let's have a look. Okay, so we're up against Tamai Chopra from India, who was around 22 something. Strong player, CM, active player, and he told me after the game that he prepared this line against us. So obviously, knight e2, which is actually quite interesting. In my repertoire, I didn't actually mention this because it's not so commonly played, but I think it's been played more and more. So I'm going to have to add that to the repertoire playlist actually, because both this guy and Stanley both played this move against me, and clearly it's some sort of prep that they've found for our opening. And I think the idea is to be a bit more flexible if we take. So you've probably seen in the way I handle bishop e3 lines and castling that I quite often, if the knight's on f3, so if something like this, if they castle, one of the ways we sort of handle it is they play at some point h3, we'll take on f3, we'll play knight g4, and you get a reasonable game, we get equal chances. And with knight e2, if he plays h3 now, I think taking on e2 isn't as nice for us actually. So knight d7, but here, see now in this position, do I really want to take on e2? Because he can just go queen takes e2, and now, so for example here, in this position, for example, there's no knight g4. And even if there was magically knight g4, he could just go back to d2. It wouldn't matter to him. So he's basically trying to get an improved version of the main line, and it works quite well. So here, we try and keep our bishop, take an f4, go back, and we're slightly worse here. In fact, we look what the engine thinks, we're in a bit of trouble. So now I'm not a massive believer in practical play, but the engine saying, you know, plus 0.9 or 1 is going to make a huge deal when we're, you know, human. We're going to make 2-point swing errors just by the fact we're not engines. So that's not the problem here. But my worry here for black is, where is our counterplay coming from? Because white here has pretty much none of the disadvantages that we normally have. They normally have in the main line, and it's kind of hard for us to get too much beyond passive rook e8, rook d8 ideas. Get counterplay. So we have to be very careful here, I think. So queen e1, they want to play knight d5 as a potential threat. So again, that's another common Czech Pirc theme, right? That knight d5 maneuver. So if we play something sloppy, like, I don't know, rook d8 here, knight d5, we just win on the spot. It's important you always look out whenever they put the queen and the queen on the same diagonal, just be a bit careful of knight d5 coming, because the point is it's going to be check at the end. So if we take on e1, it's going to be knight takes e7 check, and then they're going to take back, and we're going to be lost. That being said, sometimes if we play like rook e8 like I did, if they play knight d5 now, we might even be able to play queen d8. We can also take off. So let's say here, takes, sorry, not takes, I guess you'd take this. Maybe we're okay. Knight g3, so that's an error. Bishop g6, queen f2. And hopefully what you're seeing here is the opening has gone 100% correctly for white, but we're still not lost. Okay? So this player, he's over 2200 FIDE. He's known we're going to play Czech Perk. He's used Stockfish or Lespejazzle to get a really nice improved version of the main line and to get a better position, right? But we're still got a huge amount of resources as black here. We're not lost at all. And I think white kind of, you could tell at the board that he was like, he knew in his head that he was meant to be better here, but he didn't really know what to do now because there's no forced win. If he tries to push his pawns, we can just take off d3 and other things. So we're probably okay. So knight h5. Take this. So in general, piece trades should help us. So he defends this pawn. So he's trying to just power through with e5. So the game continues. You can probably play bishop h4. I think we've almost equalized. Bishop g3 takes. So the engine thinks white is slightly better, but I think we're okay. This bishop kind of stops the z-pawn rolling, because we'll just trade on d3. And we've got nice control on e5, so if he plays d5, we're going to go knight e5. The most interesting move would be to take on d6 here, but I think we're good. We can just go get some counterplay. So he plays queen f3. We'll take off. And actually, here, I think we were the ones that were pushing, if anything. We got the lovely knight, and in the end, it was a draw. So yeah, the engine agrees it's outdrawn. So he's got these two pawns he has to worry about. For me, I'm slightly concerned he can play f5 at some point. I think at the time I was wondering whether he had any way he could, in the future, sag this rook on f1 with this knight on e6 via something like f5 here. So let's say this happened. Knight takes, and yeah, turns out it's not very good, but on the board it seemed quite scary. Yeah. So this is the game against Stanley. He's a FIDE master. We'd actually played before in the Czech Perk. We got quite an easy draw, if I remember rightly, when he played bishop e3. So again, this one, I noticed he played really fast. And we got into that same knight e2 idea that the previous opponent from India played. And this game was played less than a month ago, so it's very recent. So I presumed that he'd done some prep here. So we try to mix it up as black. Take on d4. Play bishop g4. Probably not the best idea. The computer prefers queen b6 here, which would be my recommendation here. Yeah. So we got in a bit of trouble, but again, bishop c4 allowed us to get into the game with a quick d5. So you can see. So in this position, bishop b4. probably should play queen f2 earlier, I'd say. So in this position, queen f2 I think could cause us some trouble. But he played bishop c4, and I think now we're completely fine. We're going to castle, we're going to play rook e8, we're going to get some really nice counter chances, and if we lose a pawn, like on d5, it's not the end of the world. So we go here, here, and went d4 to stop c5, d4, which would win a piece quite quickly. So we just play this. And here, we're equal. We should just play safely, maybe double up on e-file. We're completely fine. So he's got 6 pawns, we got 6 pawns, got bishop and knight, bishop and knight. Now, bearing in mind our opponent had prepped against us, this is a very good result for us as black. But instead I played this move, which I calculated to be a draw, but I missed something here. But thankfully, my opponent didn't realise either, so we ended up doing a perpetual here. The main problem he has is here that he tries a move like queen d3. We've got some very nice bishop e2 ideas coming at some points, and tactically this knight is in a bit of trouble. I don't know why I did that. He goes queen d2. Then we've got rook e2, probably. However, there is an idea for him here that stops us getting a perpetual. So the idea to stop perpetual here for him is to actually play rook e1 here and go for this weak back rank idea. And I think the engine thinks it's about +1 now. So he should have gone for this, but instead he is happy for a draw. And yeah. So there are going to be times when the opening goes horribly, horribly wrong, and we're going to have to use the natural resources in our position to try and swindle our opponent. Now, sometimes we can't do it, we just have to accept that we've lost, but in general, we've always got chances, and this next game illustrates this, because at the board I thought I was lost, but we still somehow managed to get the win. So we're up against a strong player, CM from France, so it's going to be a tough game, and he'd clearly prepared a really good line against us, and this can happen. So we can see he goes straight into the main line. He was playing quite quickly, and he played this h3 idea. Now, in most of the time they're going to castle. We saw in the previous game queen d2, but h3 is much stronger. So the idea is if we take here, which is probably the best move, they're probably going to go queen takes and have some, and it's still reasonable for us. We'll play bishop e7, let's say. Takes, maybe bishop e7, probably still okay. But in the game we played bishop h5, and it's quite a provocative move. G4. I've had games before. I think I played against an FM in an overboard game. My opponent probably saw that I had games against an FM in this line, and they played G4. I took on F4, and it was a crazy game. So they copied it here. Now, it's important we take an F4. We're going to get this F5 idea, going to win our bishop. So we get into this position here, and we've got to be very careful, because white is actually going to try and go queenside probably. We play bishop d2, queen b6, castles, and rook to e8, and we're actually worse here. The board, I didn't realise just how badly, but we'll soon see. We played e5. So we exchanged off. And I went for some tactics. So the rook on e file against the queen. Bishop e3, which is a mistake. We can now play queen a5. But we played a mistake as well. So bishop c5. I sort of was hoping he'd go bishop e3, bishop c5, maybe be a draw. But instead he's got this move. Takes, queen c4. And you can see here, it's completely won for white, really. Okay, so the main problem we have here is this pawn f7. And this knight are both attack now, so we want to play knight d5. We can just take it. We just lose. So we end up having to play this move. And suddenly, we're just hoping to swindle here. It's a much stronger, well, 2100 cm in the slow play game is going to be very difficult. But we both got a reasonably low time. So, plays queen c4 some mistake, but he actually can sack his queen here, play knight d2. I thought this was a lovely win if he found it. Takes, and now e6, and this wins for him. This sacking the queen. It's going to go knight check coming in, take on d7. This would have been a lovely win for him, but he didn't see it. And in the end, he actually went back to c4. And suddenly we have chances. So we play rook f8, rook f1, queen c5. And suddenly we've got quite good activity. And in this position, he blundered c4. But even if he doesn't do this, I think we're okay now. And, you know, within a couple of moves, suddenly he's actually lost. We can just keep moving these pawns up. And it's actually checkmate coming. So he resigned here, but if he didn't, we're just going to go knight d3, then knight c3. And it's a checkmate there. So that was a really nice save and a swindle, I guess. Now we have tens of thousands of games online with the Czech Pirc, so a lot to choose from here, but I'm going to show you this game, which is against Sergei Zagalko, which is my highest rated win online in Blitz and in the Czech Pirc. So it's a good game and shows you what I recommend against the h3 line. So we play e6 and then d5. So we trade off. I think this is quite thematic for black. We're just hitting the knights and going a castle. So the computer wants us to take with the pawn here. We took with the queen. So we take the knight because of the if we take the pawn before we go knight takes d5. So our king needs to somehow get to g7 maybe. So the position is actually equal here, but I think it feels like white's winning because he's got all these pawns, but we can actually get our rooks going quite fast, so actually only 0. So we get our rooks in. Maybe play rook b8 here. We go for the c3 pawn. So here maybe he could play rook e3. He doesn't, so let's go try and win his pawn. Now we're actually better, so even a player like Zagalko can fall to these sort of things. I'm going to try and get our queen in. Go for checkmate. And yeah, rook takes g2. And he actually resigned here. So even via European champion, Check Perk can get the job done. So this is just checkmate. Yeah. Moves back, we're just going to go check and then Queen G2. And if he goes here, we just take Queen G2, so resigned. So those were some of my recent games in the Czech Pirc. And I think the key is to see is that the more we play games, the more we recognize the patterns, middle game structures, the traps, and even like we saw against that French candidate master, when things do go wrong, we have the resources to not just lose, but sometimes to turn it around. So hopefully those games will give you a flavour of how I handle it. In the next video, what I want to do is I want to show you how Alireza, Razenkow, Mamedarov, how they've been handling the Czech Pirc. So we've seen Alireza play a few times in Blitz and online play. Razenkow's played it in slow play, Mamedarov in slow play. And let's have a look at how they play it to a high level and hopefully improve our own middle game techniques with the Check Perk. Thank you so much for watching.